Mary Magdalene is one of the most striking and transformative figures in the Gospels. From a tormented and marginalized woman, she became one of Jesus' most dedicated followers, witnessing his crucifixion and being the first to see him resurrected. Mary's trajectory reminds us that God sees beyond appearances and offers new chances for everyone who seeks his forgiveness. Follow Mary's moving journey, a story of faith and redemption, which shows us that through the love of Christ, even the most suffering lives can be completely restored. Subscribe to the channel for more exciting biblical stories and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. If you like the content, don't forget to send a thanks a lot. And if you want to support the channel even more, become a member and gain access to exclusive benefits. Mary Magdalene was born in the small town of Magdala on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, a simple village surrounded by hills and with an always busy market, where fishermen, traders and travelers mingled. Life in Magdala was not easy, especially for a woman like Maria, who learned from an early age what it was like to survive on the margins without great privileges or comfort. The place, with its dirt streets and simple huts, was a meeting point for people from different cultures, a constant mix of accents and unfamiliar faces. Magdala was like this, a city of quick passages where secrets and stories intertwined, and Maria grew up as part of this busy scene, where people didn't linger, where everything was provisional. No one noticed the hidden pains, the empty looks, or the silent anguish she carried. Little by little, Maria gained a reputation that few knew in depth, but that easily fueled local conversations and gossip. Who really was that woman? Many only knew about her what they wanted to see, someone marked by visible and invisible choices and scars. And as time passed, she became more and more withdrawn into her solitude, a soul that never seemed to find rest, constantly tormented by a weight that even she herself could not explain. For Maria, the days passed slowly, like a long march under the weight of everything she carried inside. The village of Magdala continued its routine, the market was noisy, the voices were hurried, but for her, the sound of conversations mixed with an emptiness that was difficult to describe. In the eyes of those people, Mary Magdalene was just a disturbed woman, carrying shadows that no one wanted to understand. Their looks were of fear or contempt. Few wondered what really ailed her. She was an uncomfortable mystery, a whisper of warning to those who passed her on the streets. Inside, Maria felt something that not even she could explain. A deep sadness, a despair that appeared like a dark wave threatening to take her away. It was said that she was tormented by demons, and at many times, even she herself believed it. The weight seemed to grow every day, as if some force trapped her in that solitude, distorting her image until she no longer recognized who she was. Her own thoughts were labyrinths, and the feeling that she was trapped inside herself consumed her, making each new dawn a silent struggle. But deep within his pain, there still remained a thread of hope. The hope that one day it could all end, that there would be a way out of the suffering that seemed endless. That was when the first words about a different man began to spread through the village. A man who talked about forgiveness and healing. The rumors about that mysterious man reached Maria's ears, almost like a whisper. In the midst of the market's activity, they said he healed the sick, freed the oppressed, and above all, he saw people's hearts without condemning them. She overheard a conversation between two women who were fervently commenting on a crowd that followed him. "He speaks of a God who loves those who have been rejected," one of them whispered, her eyes shining. Maria, without meaning to, came closer to hear more. It awakened something in her, a shy spark in the midst of her darkness, and even though a voice inside her said it was foolish to hope, she couldn't help but be curious. Days later, she learned that he would be nearby, on the outskirts of Magdala. Something inside her pulsed, a mixture of fear and longing, as if this encounter could finally bring relief to everything she carried. With her heart pounding, she went to where they said he would pass. In the distance, he saw the crowd, and in the middle of it, that man who seemed simple, but emanated a calm that attracted everyone. When he finally got close enough to see him, his eyes met his, and it was as if he saw his entire soul. Maria shuddered, feeling that in that look there was compassion, understanding, and a strength that she had never seen in anyone. Without saying a word, Jesus looked at her in a way that made something change inside her. In a moment, she felt the weight of her pain beginning to dissolve, as if an invisible hand touched her and lifted away each torment one by one. She knew, without understanding how, that this man had freed her soul. After that encounter, Mary Magdalene felt something new, a peace she could barely name, as if she could finally breathe without the weight of the shadows that accompanied her. From that day on, a decision formed in her heart. She would follow that man wherever he went. There was no longer any life in Magdala to keep her bound. All she wanted now was to walk alongside the one who had freed her. Jesus did not send her back, nor did he drive her away. On the contrary, he welcomed his presence in a way that no one had ever done before. At first, Maria just watched, still trying to understand that peculiar group that followed her. There were fishermen, disciples, simple men, and people from everywhere, each with a different story, but all united by hope. And Mary became one of them. He began to accompany Jesus and his disciples through the villages and roads, facing the fatigue of long walks, the heat, hunger, and nights outside. None of that mattered. She knew she had found her place. More than following him, Maria felt there was something more she could do. Even without means, she helped with whatever was needed, organizing small tasks, taking care of day-to-day details, always attentive to everyone's needs. His heart now beat for the good of that group and the message it brought to the world. She was a faithful disciple, always present, absorbing every word Jesus spoke, every gesture of kindness, like someone finding a treasure. The people who saw Mary in her new life might not even recognize her anymore. The tormented and lonely woman who wandered the streets of Magdala now walked with dignity, with a faith that made her strong. As the days went by, Maria felt something change deeply within her. The peace that before was just a slight sensation now became a force that completely transformed her. She was no longer that woman distressed and tormented by her own fears. She now experienced a freedom that seemed to grow with each step alongside Jesus. His words, which she listened to with an open heart, brought a clarity she had never had before. And at the same time, each miracle she witnessed, each person healed, made Maria feel part of something that went beyond what she could imagine. In the midst of the crowds, while Jesus preached, Mary was surprised to observe those who approached with anxious eyes, seeking the relief that she herself had found. She knew what it was like to have a heavy heart. She knew loneliness and hopelessness. And now, seeing so many being touched by the same peace that had transformed her life, something in her grew stronger. She began to understand that the pain she had felt prepared her for that moment, as if all the suffering had led to the purpose of helping and welcoming those who, like her, needed a new chance. Maria was not just one follower among many. She was a disciple whose devotion was unwavering. In every village, in every city they passed, she was there, ready to help, whether with a smile or a word of encouragement. She saw in people the same hunger for redemption that once brought her there. His heart had become a source of compassion that seemed to be renewed with each miracle, with each hug that Jesus gave the sick, with each word of comfort he offered to the afflicted. With each city they crossed, Maria saw the crowds grow. Men, women, and children came from all directions, bringing with them their illnesses, pains, and hopes. Jesus welcomed them with open arms, and Mary, always at his side, felt renewed when she saw those meetings take place. But at the same time, tensions began to emerge more clearly. The religious leaders gave them cold, suspicious looks, murmuring among themselves about the impact Jesus had on people. Maria realized the danger. but her faith grew. There was nothing that could keep her from the path she had decided to follow. Even in the midst of threats, she did not weaken. Deep down, he felt that nothing else mattered other than being there, supporting the man who had given his life a new meaning. And so, she remained firm, knowing that she would face everything alongside him without wavering. With each new obstacle, with each hostility encountered, Maria seemed to grow even stronger. It was as if faith itself enveloped her, protecting her from fear and giving her courage to move forward. In moments of rest, while Jesus and the disciples met to plan the next steps, Mary remained attentive, always ready to offer help or a friendly word. She knew she was not a disciple like the others. His role was different but equally important. While many hesitated, she was one of the few who stood by Jesus with a devotion that didn't need words. His silent and constant presence was a testimony to his unwavering faith. She became an example to others who approached, a woman whose life had been transformed by faith and who was now guided only by this new purpose. But as they walked towards Jerusalem, Mary felt something big approaching. When they arrived in Jerusalem, the atmosphere was already heavy, as if the entire city knew that something great and dark was about to happen. Maria walked alongside the others, but inside she felt a tightness in her chest. Rumors about Jesus' capture had spread quickly, and many were murmuring about betrayal and conspiracy on the street corners. Despite her fear, Maria did not move away, even for an instant. She knew she couldn't protect him from what was to come, but the thought of leaving him alone was unbearable. Then the arrest happened brutally and suddenly. Mary, who had already expected this, felt her heart break when she saw Jesus being taken away. That image, his wrists tied, his face still serene, stuck deeply in his soul. And even knowing the danger she was in, she followed the dark procession at a distance, without caring about the looks of contempt and accusations that began to echo from all sides. The next morning, when Jesus was taken to Golgotha, Mary was among the few people who refused to abandon him. The path to the mountain was a torment, and with each step the crowd became more hostile, some shouting insults, others just watching in silence, as if witnessing a tragic spectacle. But Mary, firm and with teary eyes, walked next to the cross without looking away for even a second. She felt that her presence was the last gesture of love she could offer to the one who had freed her. When they lifted him up on the cross, Mary stood there, motionless, watching the scene unfold like a nightmare from which she could not wake up. The cold wind cut her skin, the heavy clouds covered the sky, and she held back crying with all her strength, as if she wanted to be strong for him. It was a pain that words couldn't describe, an emptiness that threatened to swallow her whole. Even so, Maria refused to leave. And as she watched every moment of that scene, she knew that it was not the end yet. After the ordeal, silence took over everyone who had followed Jesus to the cross. Jesus' body had been rushed to the tomb, borrowed from Joseph of Arimathea, and Mary Magdalene, along with some other women, followed the entire ritual amidst deep pain and sadness. She could not accept that the one who had transformed her life, healed her deepest wounds, and shown God's love in ways she had never imagined, was now locked in a dark, cold tomb. Every hour without him seemed endless, a deep emptiness that threatened to sink her back into the shadows that once consumed her. The dawn of the third day brought Mary back to the garden where Jesus' body was buried. With cautious steps, carrying perfumes and spices, she approached the tomb, seeking to offer it the last gesture of love and respect. However, when she got there, Maria's heart froze. The stone had been removed, and the body was no longer there. Despair took over her. Where could they have taken him? Who would dare desecrate his master's rest? Confused, she ran to warn the disciples, but not even they understood what could have happened. Maria, unable to move away, returned to the tomb and amidst her tears felt more alone than ever. But then, something unexpected happened. In the midst of her tears, she heard a soft voice asking, "Why are you crying, woman?" Frightened, Maria wiped her eyes, and when she looked up, she saw a man she didn't immediately recognize. Thinking he was the gardener, he begged, "Lord, if you took him away from here, tell me where you put him, and I will take him." It was then that she heard her name, said with unmistakable affection, "Maria." Upon hearing that voice, she felt her heart race. It was him. He was there, alive before her. Upon recognizing Jesus' voice, Mary felt her legs weaken, and without thinking, she fell to her knees before him. It was as if the world around him had stopped. He was there, before her, not as a memory, but as the miracle of life itself, and with a serene sparkle in his eyes that she would never forget. His mind tried to understand the impossible, but his heart already knew the truth. Jesus was alive. All the suffering, the pain, the mourning that had consumed her in the last few days seemed to dissolve in that moment. She wanted to hug him, hold him, like someone holding on to their own hope to never let go. But Jesus, with the calm that was so characteristic of him, gently stopped her. "Don't stop me," he said, his tone loving. He explained that he still needed to ascend to the Father, but that she had an important mission. Maria, still confused, just listened, absorbing every word. He instructed her to go and tell the disciples what she had seen, what she had witnessed with her own eyes. She, Mary Magdalene, who had once been rejected and forgotten by so many, now became the bearer of the most extraordinary news the world had ever known. With her heart overflowing, she got up and ran towards the disciples. His sandals kicked up dust as he walked back, but nothing mattered. The message it brought was greater than any fear or doubt. When he saw them, he took a deep breath and, still panting, announced, "I saw the Lord." At first they looked at her in disbelief, confused and hesitant, but Mary spoke with a certainty that was impossible to ignore. She described the encounter, Jesus' voice calling her name, and faithfully repeated his words as if they were precious. Too much to get lost in the excitement. Despite having told the disciples about Jesus' resurrection, Mary felt the weight of doubt in the eyes of some. Some still questioned what they had heard, as if something so extraordinary was difficult to believe. But she wasn't shaken. Jesus' words still echoed in her mind, and she knew that she had fulfilled the mission given by him. Those days were difficult, as Mary not only faced the disbelief of others, but also the strange look of many who did not understand why a woman like her was the first to carry the most important news of their faith. She noticed the whispers, the expressions of distrust, but she remained firm. What she witnessed sustained her. Even with the resistance, the disciples began to feel the impact of the message she had brought. Little by little, disbelief gave way to hope, and the signs that Jesus was really alive became clearer to them. Maria did not seek credit or recognition. Her joy was in knowing that Jesus had chosen her, entrusting her with the task of announcing his victory over death. She continued alongside the disciples, sharing renewed faith and hope with them. Her presence, marked by strength and serenity, was a constant reminder that Jesus saw value in her where no one else did. And so Mary, the first witness to the resurrection, also became a living witness to the transformation that Christ's love brings. As time passed, Mary Magdalene became an increasingly important figure among Jesus' followers. Her courage and unwavering faith were inspirations to all, and many saw her as an example of perseverance. She was a living reminder that Jesus' love and compassion knew no bounds. He had chosen someone society despised to entrust with his most sacred message. Although her presence was respected by many, Mary still faced doubts and questions, especially from those who had difficulty accepting the central role she had assumed in the resurrection story. For these, it was difficult to understand why Jesus had chosen her to be the first witness. But she didn't let that get her down. Instead, he used these situations to share the truth of Jesus and his love for everyone, regardless of their origins or background. With each testimony, his voice gained more strength, his spirit firmer, as if the mission he gave him was still his purpose. Mary knew that her story and her testimony were powerful and could reach those who had not yet heard the message of Christ. She continued to spread this truth, facing challenges with the same faith that had kept her firm at the foot of the cross. And with that, Mary Magdalene's legacy was established, not as a simple follower, but as a leader among those who believed in the message of love and redemption that Jesus had brought to the world. The years passed, and the presence of Mary Magdalene among the disciples became a symbol of strength and faith. She had followed Jesus from the beginning, experiencing firsthand the pain and joy that accompanied his mission, and now her life continued to reflect the love he had taught. Although time took many of the apostles to different paths, spreading the message of Jesus to distant lands, Mary remained firm in her vocation, always ready to share her testimony with everyone who crossed her path. Even at an advanced age, his voice maintained an impressive conviction. Every time she talked about the moment she heard Jesus call her name in the garden, her eyes lit up, and it was as if she relived that moment. Those who heard her not only believed her words, but felt the peace and truth she brought, as if Christ himself were present. Maria never tired of telling about the transformation he made in her life, showing that no one was beyond the reach of her love. In the last days of her life, Mary Magdalene was remembered not only as the first witness to the resurrection, but as a woman whose faith never wavered, neither in the face of loss nor the disbelief of others. His name circulated among Christian communities as a symbol of redemption, strength, and above all, fidelity. Those who visited her heard her story with wonder and hope. She spoke about Jesus' love with the same emotion as when she saw him for the first time, transforming her pain into testimony. His entire life became an open letter, living proof that no one is forgotten by God. The story of Mary Magdalene teaches us that regardless of the past, there is always a way back to the light. She shows us that God's love goes beyond appearances and flaws, reaching those who society despises and transforming their lives. When we remember his trajectory, we understand that for Christ, it doesn't matter where we come from, but where we are willing to go. Mary teaches us about the courage to stand firm, even when the world around us doesn't believe in us. She also inspires us to live a faith that does not bend to circumstances, to seek the truth with a pure heart, and to follow our calling, even if the path seems uncertain. In the end, Mary Magdalene was not just a disciple. She was a living message of love and redemption. Her life is an invitation for all of us to draw closer to Christ with our flaws and our fears, certain that he sees, knows, and values each of us, just as he did for her. If you like the story of Mary Magdalene and want to continue following other stories of faith and overcoming, be sure to like this video and share it with those you love. And of course, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new content. Together, let's explore more powerful lessons from the Bible.